But looks like some people are already here. How are you doing, everybody? Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Today I'd like to give some sort of a collection of random advice for how to get ready for a game or a tournament or a match or something of that sort, right? Yeah, not a lesson for Ultimate Sensei. You're welcome, Mitch, to come and watch. Yeah. So I'm going to be offering some, random pieces of advice on this topic, and then I will gladly answer questions that some of you may have about related topics. Okay. So let's not ask like super random questions today, like how do I get good at tactics and how do I get good at openings and, how much time should I spend studying Lasker's games or something like that, right? Because each of those questions could be like an hour divergence. And we've got a pretty small amount of time before Between Two Senseis comes on. Yeah. So I'm going to presuppose that you guys sort of know how to play chess. And we're just going to talk about like advice for like how to bring out your best on a particular day or a particular like weekend or something like that, right? It could be OTB or online. Yeah, this stuff should apply to either. So I'm gonna start out with some pieces of advice, and then if you want clarifications about stuff as I go for it. If you have like completely different questions, if you have routines of yours that you want to ask about and get my feedback on, go for it. Absolutely. All right. So. And of course, hi to everybody, and thanks for being here. I've got a chessboard up. I don't know in advance if I'm going to need it or not, but there it is. Chessboard up. So my first piece of advice for getting ready for something is to have a goal. Most of the things that you can do to prepare for an event or a tournament actually fall into... Thanks, casual player. I am. Actually fall into the general category of like things that'll make you take things seriously and therefore you'll get the most out of it. Because basically, let me give you like first an example of like the opposite of preparing well for something and how you don't get anything out of it. If you go into a 30-minute chess game with an opponent, you have a chance to spend 30 to 60 minutes thinking about things, playing with this opponent, testing yourself, working on some weakness of yours or some goal of yours or something like that, right? You have some kind of an opportunity there. Let's say you don't think about the game at all before you sit down to play it. Let's say you spend 1 minute out of your 30 minutes thinking about the game. Let's say you didn't really have like any kind of plan of what you were trying to get out of the game. You're just like, well, I'll sit down and we'll see what happens, kind of like me to like a stream, right? Like, oh, I'll just click go live and just see what happens. I don't really have an idea of what I hope people get out of this. I don't really have like a plan for them or for me. Let's just, click go live and see what happens. Well, basically, I'm an exception because I know so much about teaching that, I can just cough something up and it'll be useful to somebody. But supposing that you're not me and you just go into something unprepared like that, the result is going to be a waste of time for yourself and likely also for the other person playing that 30-minute game with you because you're not putting much into it. You're not getting much out of the experience as well. You're not going to learn much. They're not going to learn much either. So what I'm looking to do is the opposite of that. I'm trying to create a situation where even before the event starts, you have some kind of investment in it. That increases the chances that you're going to get something out of it. It increases the chances that you're going to take the thing seriously because you're more invested in it. So that's sort of my general, that's sort of like the general angle that we're going for here with this. Hey, Merlin. All right, so my first piece of advice is going to be to always have a goal. Maybe 2 goals, not 20 goals. That's too much. Goals provide focus. Focus is helpful. If you've got like 10 goals, that kind of defeats the purpose of focus, right? Because then you're essentially not focused. Yep, Mitch. So you want to have some kind of goal, maybe two goals. A goal could be a sporting goal. It could be a very specific small goal. It could be, if you were Mitch, to use your time that you have on the clock in that game so that you actually, invest even more of yourself during the game. So it could be like when you're preparing for the game, you're just reminding yourself, my goal is to spend 25 to 28 minutes out of my 30 minutes on this game. So at the end of the game, just going to double check this for myself. My clock should read some number between 2 minutes and 5 minutes. And it's very measurable. When the game is over, I can just look at the clock and double check that and see if I achieved my goal. And maybe I'm going to even try to, by talking to myself about the goal a little bit in advance, make sure that I remember the goal during the game. Because, maybe I've had a game where my goal was to spend 25 minutes of 30 minutes thinking. And maybe that's been my goal before, and I played through the game, and then at the end I looked at the clock and was like, 25 and a half minutes left. That's not the kind of 25 I was going for. That means I spent 4 minutes on this game, so I played a blitz game instead of a standard game. Okay. So if that's happened to you a few times before, that you had a goal and you just missed it because of not being conscious or aware of your goal, and that's very common for everybody, then you need to work on making that stuff more conscious by focusing on it more and talking to yourself about it more as you lead up to the thing. So you remind yourself, my goal is to spend 25 to 28 minutes thinking here. So I'm going to try and check in with myself every now and then. I'm going to check my clock and see how I'm doing on time. Maybe at move 5, move 10, move 15, and move 20, I'm going to check in on my time. And some people do that. If you've ever been to OTB tournaments, you may have seen people have score sheets, and on the score sheet, maybe at move 10 and move 20 and move 30, they circle that number on the score sheet in advance. And at each of those moves, they'll write down how much time they have on their clock when they get to move 10, 20, and 30. So implementing little things like that are going to help you to be aware of and pay attention and stick to your goal can be really helpful, right? In general, goals are better if they're actionable. Yeah, in general, they're better if they're somewhat realistic. What kind of goals work for different people will vary a little bit. Some people will go into a tournament with a competitive goal that is something like, I'm going to win. For example, they'll go into a 9-round tournament and say, one of my goals is to score 5 points out of 9. And another one of my goals in this tournament is to use my time better. It's very possible to have sort of a results kind of goal and a more of a chess or X's and O's kind of goal at the same time. That's very possible. And as I said, I usually have one major goal and 1 to 2 smaller goals. So I usually have 3 goals, or sometimes I'll have one competitive goal and one chess goal, or one psychological goal, something like that. And that's not so much that you get completely lost in the goals. But I could imagine if I went into a 9-round tournament with a mix of IMs and GMs and FMs and stuff, at some point I might have had a goal I'm going to try and draw one game against a GM during this event. And that would be sort of my result goal. And then my other goal might be something I'm working on defending better. And that kind of goal means every time I'm in a bad position, I can be oh, great, here's a chance to work on my goal. So, let's get excited. We've got a bad position. All right, it's a chance to work on defending. And then get into that part. Are you allowed to write times on your score sheet? Yes. Yes. And Chesterfish, Wesley So, in my opinion, should have been defaulted from the game. The rule about not writing notes is basically to keep people from writing down stuff that helps them play the game, a variation or something like that, where it could help you keep track of it. But it's sort of strictly banned anyway. And what he was writing down was little motivational phrases for himself, I think. Stuff you can do it, Wesley. You're, gosh darn it, you're good enough, and stuff like that. So that's not allowed, but you are allowed to write down the time. Yeah. Whoa. Sounds like the blender's inside the vacuum cleaner downstairs. All right. I'm gonna, in order to not lose my like thread in my progress, I'm gonna note down some questions I want to get back to later. So how to handle butterflies and sleep depth. Yeah, I agree with eyelash, but that is basically what he was writing, that, and the decision was the other. And I think it was even like his opponent like complained to the arbiter in order to get him in trouble because his opponent was a loser. Anyway, so you know, people chose not to exercise their judgment there. So having a goal, very useful for having some focus, and it's going to give you extra motivation as well, right? Like sometimes when you fall into a bad position, you may be like, ugh, oh, I'm defending again. Now I'm going to like sit here for like an hour and then probably like lose at the end. And like, you know, why do I have to like put up this fight? But if you go into the tournament and your goal was like, I'm going to get better at defense, you're like, yes, I'm in a bad position. All right, let's see what I can do this time. So I think that those kind of goals will always provide extra motivation and extra focus. And they will also like help you follow through on it. And often you need some little something to prepare yourself mentally for it. Okay. Sometimes you need to do some extra, like reminding yourself of your goal along the way beforehand to keep it in mind, to not forget it in the heat of the moment. Okay. So that's useful. So, another thing, that's very useful. So that's goals, some kind of a plan for it. Another thing that's very useful is getting physically ready for it. This is again something that shows that you're investing in it, right? But like if you make a special effort to eat correctly, sleep correctly, exercise correctly, let's say those kind of things, some of you may do that every single day. Hooray. If you eat well, sleep well, and exercise well every day, like congratulations, you basically are already a winner at life, period, right? But let's say you're somebody who struggles with 1, 2, or 3 of those things at times. Cool, Charlie. Then what I would say is you could make an effort to do all those things right just the day of your tournament / the night before your tournament or your game or your match that you care about, right? So if our like for example, we had 8 students yesterday who were playing a tournament. I think a lot of them felt a lot of stress and pressure. I'm guessing of those 8 players. They actually acquitted themselves quite well. I think all 8 of them basically did a great job of playing to their level despite like stress. I didn't really see choking. I would have probably choked a little bit with butterflies and stuff despite a lot of experience with it. But I think a lot of them felt a lot of stress and pressure the day, you know, going into it. So let's say you're them and it's Friday night and you've got the event on Saturday, right? So it's Friday night, you're getting ready. You've got this tournament on Saturday. It's going to be a couple hours long, 4 games. I would say on Friday already, that's when you really have to start taking care of yourself physically. So, you know, eat the best you can, exercise, and go to bed. Like have a plan to make sure that each of these things happens. Have a plan to eat well. Have a plan to get your exercise and have a plan to get to bed early. If you're like, oh, I meant to get it to bed at 11 and now it's like 11:20 and you're sort of like scrambling around, you're like, well, I'm only 20 minutes late or 30 minutes late. You start putting yourself in a bad mind frame of like, I'm behind, I'm trying to catch up, I'm not achieving what I meant to achieve. I'm making excuses for myself. I'm making excuses in advance for like losing tomorrow. Because then when you're playing in your tournament, if you haven't eaten, slept, or exercised correctly, if you're in your tournament, you start feeling sluggish or weak or like you don't have the energy or stamina or desire to keep fighting, you've got ready-made excuses for yourself, right? You're like, I could have done this, but you know, I didn't get to bed on time last night. And so you give yourself an excuse why you could lose the game while you're still playing the game. And I'm guessing that all of you, like in an objective setting where we're just sitting around discussing this stuff, I'm guessing all of you can see why that would be like a weak thing to have, right? Or a bad thing to have. Like during a game, a prepared excuse that's coming into your mind that you're thinking about. Instead of thinking about how do I fight out of this, you're thinking about like how you're going to like explain and excuse yourself for losing the game. If anyone's got questions about why that's not good, you can ask those now. I'm going to quickly scan chat for good questions that I need to add here and get back to in a little bit, okay? All right. That's fair enough that you disagree about that case money. And I'm not saying that I'm right about it or anything, you know. I'm just saying I was just giving my opinion on that. But that's just something that came up and is separate from how to get ready. Is Puzzle Rush enough for calculation training? No. It's not even calculation training. So no. It doesn't even count as calculation training. It's zero calculation training. Okay, we've got the question, do you pump up or chill out before a game? Very good question. Fix your end game, please. Yeah, today we're not talking about the end game, but I'm happy to. As people who are frequent visitors to this channel will tell you, I spent a lot of time on the end game. So yeah, you'll find me talking about it another time. Okay. And question, is it stupid to check only one color of your opponent's games? Best snack was already on my mental list of things I was going to answer. And how do you know what to prepare when you don't know your opponent? All right. Excellent. Thank you. Great questions. All right. So, finishing up with the physical part. My theory is if you made the effort to eat, if you made the effort to exercise, if you made the effort to sleep, if you do those things successfully, then it's the opposite of waking up with excuses for your tournament, right? It's the opposite of you're in your game and you've got like excuses for losing. You're in the game and you're like, I've done everything right to set myself up for this. And now whatever I give is going to be my best. I think it provides an extra motivation and confidence, because also like it showed you, oh, I was able to like, you know, prepare myself a salad instead of like popping something into the microwave from some frozen food, right? Or I was able to find the time to exercise. I did feel nice and tired. I did get to bed on time. Like I achieved all these kinds of things. I can achieve this thing too of playing well for the next hour. So I think the success in achieving those little things helps you, but I think also the investment helps you. You've put more into it. You're all in already before you start playing. There's a thing that sometimes happens with people, which is an example of how you create buy-in and investment from yourself. Sometimes you're playing a game and you come up with a great move, right? You're thinking and you come up with a move that's just fantastic. Like you can tell it's a good move. The thought process to reach it was interesting, and you come up with this great move and you play a great move, and then the game's continuing, right? How do you play in a game where you've come up with a great move versus a game where you're just playing along? I would argue, and most of you should be able to recognize this from your own experience as being true or not true for you, but I would argue that when you found a great move, that on its own, regardless of your goals or your strength or the strength of your opposition or anything, having found a great move can get you like enthusiastic and motivated to play good moves afterwards, right? So that you take this good move and you create a series of good moves building on it. So you create a great game. I think many people have had the experience at some point, you're playing a game and you're like, this might be like my Mona Lisa or whatever, you know, this might be the game of my life. And when you're playing the game of your life, you're more motivated to not blow it, right? And to really just push it through. So I think you can do that same thing starting even before the first move that you play or the first great move that you find. I think you can get a similar effect from feeling like, you know, that you've done all the preparation right and when you get into a game. And this can apply for things other than just the physical prep, right? Doing the physical prep, having the goal that I talked about first, that can be another thing that helps you create the positive snowball, right? All right, let me see how you prep for your first tournament without creating too much stress. Because all this stuff that I'm suggesting so far puts more importance on the thing, which for some people might actually create more stress. But I think that if you're succeeding at all these things, if you feel like you're doing everything right, that should generally overwhelm the stress with positivity. But we'll see. Okay. What if you are midway in an event and you are doing badly on your goals? How not to collapse? Great. No, that's not right, Amadan 2013. There are other separate little goals that you could have going into something. So that gets back to a topic that I already started talking about. So I'm gonna divert to answer Amadan's question right away. Saying, isn't your goal just to find the best move you can each move? What are these other kind of goals like? Well, Amadan, let me try and give you like 10 examples of possible goals to show you what intermediate goals could be like, okay? So I already gave one, which was I'm going to defend well when I'm in bad positions. That's an example of like, I know it's like a weakness of mine, so I'm going to try and defend better when I'm in bad positions. That's one example. Another example could be, if I have a position that should not objectively be good, I'm going to stop playing risky moves to try to win a position that isn't winnable. Okay? That's like trying to adjust one small part of the person's thought process. Okay? When I'm in positions that aren't really winnable, I'm not going to play risky moves to try and force wins out of those positions. So that shows that the person with that goal has recognized what a weakness of theirs is, and they're trying to become more conscious about one particular weakness to improve on that. Okay? Another example I gave, using your time. Very clear. You can just look at your time and see if you're using it, and that can be your goal on its own, whether or not you do it well. Another goal could be like, I'm going to get more experience with the King's Indian defense. That's a pretty easy goal to achieve, right? You just have to remember to play the King's Indian defense. Sounds really, really doable. But that's fine. That guides what you do. Then you play the King's Indian defense every time if you can. Maybe you play the King's Indian attack as white. And you, I'm going to flag David, and then you flag him. Or tone deaf. I'm not going to rush through the opening, right? So all of these things are examples of small things. They provide like a focus to what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to play the best move every move, that's, well, yeah, to some extent, that's what everybody's doing all the time, but it's not targeted enough to create real improvement, right? If I just sat down and said, I'm now going to write, the greatest American novel, like, how would I do it without a more specific plan of how to achieve it? You can't find the best moves unless you're working on things more specific than just finding the best moves, right? You need to be working on your strategy, your tactics, your end games, your awareness of the opponent's threats, stuff like that, right? I have a student right now, and what he's working on is every move, when he thinks of a move, he then switches sides in his head and says, all right, if I'm the other person and this move gets played, do I have some way to beat this guy? So this is training him to be better at catching his opponent's possible threats and to be more careful about putting his pieces where his opponents can take them. Okay? That's a specific goal that he's working on, and it provides focus that he's just got to achieve that every single move instead of thinking about the pawn structure and the piece activity and the this and the tactics and the strategy and the plans, right? And the time that he's using, and et cetera, right? Instead, there's a specific goal, and he works on that thing. Right. But and playing the best, trying to play well, and then analyzing it and learning something from it is very useful, Amadan. There's an extra step in there, which is when you've analyzed several of your own games, at some point you'll start to notice patterns about what your strengths and weaknesses are. And from those patterns, that's how we make our goals. So our goals come from a self-awareness about the patterns of our mistakes, generally. So somebody who always has 28 minutes left on the clock in a 30-minute game, if they notice that like in like 6 of 7 games they lose that they had 28 minutes left, they could notice the pattern and then make a plan to address that pattern, right? And have a specific goal focusing on that. Right? Some people need to get better at calculating. Other people just need to get better at knowing when to calculate. Other people need to get better at recognizing when their opponent might have an option or something like that. Yeah? How do you figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are? By analyzing your games. And then after you analyze the game, you write down what you did wrong in the game in like verbal form, words, right? Like I missed an option for my opponent. I missed a defensive resource for myself. And make it as specific as you can. And then eventually you've got a list of these things and you can start to see which ones are common. All right. So let's get back to prep. So we got through goals, physical preparation, eating well, sleeping well, and exercising. So in terms of eating well, I'm not a dietitian. But I guess I could just say for a second, like, you probably have some idea when you feel better or worse or more or less energetic after different kinds of food that you eat, right? So you want to go for food that leaves you feeling neither weak nor sluggish. You want to look for the foods in your life that when you eat them, you feel like you've got some stores of energy and you're kind of alert-ish, okay? Hard to eat well when you don't want to eat trash food. No, that's good. Don't eat trash food. So I can just give you guys one specific piece, which I might be wrong about, but I believe that during a chess game or right before a chess game, that nuts are a pretty good snack. My apologies if I'm completely wrong about this, but that's what I've kind of like observed and heard from a fair number of other chess players, that if you're like in a game, you don't usually want to eat something that's going to like spike your sugar if you still have like an hour to play, because like it may help you for like 2 minutes and then not help you afterwards. So like, you know, a candy bar wouldn't be as good as like a handful of nuts, and you can eat them gradually over time and drink a little bit of water. And that's pretty much what I would use as far as like during the game or just before the game. Also on that topic, you know how they say like not to go swimming within 30 minutes of eating if you're by yourself or whatever, because you could get a cramp or have all the blood in your stomach or something like that, right? I found this also with chess, that for me personally, it's very good to always insist on finishing my meals at least a full hour before my next round. That's the best for me. I think everybody will find slight variations of what's the best timing for them. But you need to know for yourself, like when I eat, like, you know, when do I feel my best after that? What's the best spacing? For some people, it might be like 10 minutes so that they've got the energy for longer. For other people, it might be quite a bit before because they've got a period of sluggishness and then they come out of it. So I'm not trying to tell everybody what they should do. As again, I said, I'm not a dietitian. I know very, very little about the subject. In fact, I don't really understand, you know, anything between, you know, fats and carbs and blah, blah, blah. But you should be able to find what works best for yourself if you listen to your body and then like pay attention to your experience. And whatever like maximizes your performance in general should hold true between, you know, chess or like an exam or anything else that's important to you. So for me, I would say I try to eat my meals at least an hour before a round, and I try to eat things that make me feel good afterwards. And I'll use nuts and water during a round. Maybe sometimes a little bit of like chocolate, but not like candy chocolate, right? Like sort of less sweet chocolate. All right. So that's physical preparation. one more thing I'll mention is like time and space. Okay, time and space about it. So for example, I used to always arrive at chess tournaments like the morning of the tournament in order not to have to pay for a hotel room the night before. Right? So I would like, you know, take a flight at like, you know, 6 a.m. or something, arrive somewhere at like 9 a.m., like go straight to the tournament hall with the suitcase, roll my suitcase to the board, and play my first round like that. And after the first round, go check into my room, and then play the second round, etc. I also don't tend to play great in first rounds. Well, at some point, I started traveling to tournaments the day before, and paying for that extra night of hotel room. And that year, I won like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in prizes, which I can't promise to all of you. And I know economic decisions can be tough. In my experience, it was extremely worthwhile to do that. And I think that, you know, if it's possible, separating any stress or effort of travel from your tournament is all very good for you. So, so if you can get to a tournament a day before, if you can, it's going to be very, very, very beneficial. Like you'll have time to put away your things. You'll have time to take a shower. You'll have time to whatever different things make you feel better. You'll have time to like figure out the neighborhood, maybe find a restaurant that you like, maybe like take a couple walks. Like, whereas if I'm rushing from the airport to the tournament, like I can't do any of those things. And some of those things may benefit some people more than others, right? But almost everyone will have some things that they'll benefit from if they're able to get there earlier. On the same topic of time and space, one of the best tournaments I ever had was a tournament that I played in a country I'd never been to before, where I knew basically nobody. And normally at chess tournaments, I socialized before this tournament. I would show up, I would talk to my friends. I love my chess friends. You know, we would like be talking, we'd be playing Blitz, Bug House, whatever. Then roll into the tournament hall when the pairings go up and play our games. So this one tournament, I found myself in a town where I knew nobody. And I also sort of had like nothing to do. And so I would take like a long walk to get to the tournament hall from the house of the family I was living with. So I ended up taking like a 45-minute walk, and then arrive at the tournament hall by myself, you know, 15 to 30 minutes before the game started. And then I would sit down at the board, and the board would look like this. Here, now it's useful that I've got a board up. So I would sit down at the board, and in my head, I would just sit down and start calculating. So I would start calculating like, okay, I go like E4, they go C5. I go knight F3. They play knight C6. I play D4, CD4, knight D4. If queen D6, I guess knight B3. If knight F6, knight C3, E5, knight DB5, D6. Bishop G5, A6, knight A3, B5, knight D5, queen A5 check, bishop D2, queen back to D8. All right, the E pawn is hanging in that position, but I think C4 still should be complicated and reasonable. Let's see what happens after C4. Knight takes E4, C takes B5, knight D4. B6. B6. Okay, so D2 they could take. Knight C7's threatened. All right. Now I'll pause right there for you guys. Just trying to give you like a taste of it. Okay. And Christopher Bradley's asking the obvious question about this, right? Shouldn't I be saving the brain power for the game? And for me, the answer is no. For me, the answer is this tournament was a huge success for me because every time a game started, I was warmed up. I was warmed up for the chess. I was ready to go. And so I didn't have one of those like lazy 10 to 15 minute thinks at the start of a game that produce nothing, where you play e4 and your opponent plays c5 and you play knight f3, knight c6, d4, cd4, knight d4, queen b6, and you're like, what line do I want to play against queen b6? Sort of a rare Sicilian. Like I mean, I am going to play knight b3, but then if they play like e6, what's my next move? Right? And you just like sit there and you're like, well, you know, I could play like a bishop e3 line. I could play like a4. I could play knight c3. I don't really know which ones. Does it really matter in which order I play them? Like, people sit there like that and like they're just getting nowhere. This is the important thing I want you to know. Like, the first time you think during almost every chess game, your thoughts suck. You don't really learn much about the position. You don't figure out a good move. You spend a lot of time thinking about random moves that aren't going to happen in the game. So most people in classical tournaments waste about 10 to 15 minutes on the first move they think about and don't even produce a good move. And that is what this approach is designed to avoid. Okay. So, yeah, as Charlie says, basically every sport or activity needs a warm-up. So it's a rare activity where this wouldn't be a useful thing to do, right? I mean, let's say you've got like a sprinter and they go to run the 100-meter dash. I doubt like they walk slowly out there, like kneel at the line and then just like wait for the gun and run, right? I'm guessing that they do some kind of like stretching of their legs or hopping a couple times or like some little something before they start running as fast as they can. Maybe like a mild jog or something. And you might say, whatever they're doing, like, oh, aren't they wasting some of the like, you know, ATP in their legs, some of their energy and strength, right? But you know, I think the warming up is almost always going to be worth it, as long as, you know, it's not a super tiring warm up. So to me, 10 to 15 minutes of effort is a great warm up. And I think almost anyone could benefit from coming up with some kind of routine to create a little space for their head right before a game to get into it. It could also just be like sitting down at the board and leaving everything else behind and just reminding yourself what your goals are. Go over your goals in your head. Just hone your focus, right? These kind of things will help you to go straight into the game with more motivation and find flow more easily. So, studies show you don't need to warm up before. Huh, okay. I'm surprised to hear that. You need to reduce stress as much as possible because you have an issue with nerves. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I've definitely pulled a muscle a few times when I just started running. By which I mean when I started running without any kind of like warming up or anything like that. I don't mean like the first time I learned to run. All right, let's try and answer some of these great questions here. And I think it's a good segue into nerves, which Eyelash is asking about, and somebody else had asked how to handle butterflies and those in turn preventing you from sleeping properly and getting sleep deprivation. So personally, I think that once somebody achieves flow, they will leave their nerves behind. So I think my idea of doing a calculating warm-up for 10 to 15 minutes at the board would actually help you rather than hurt you, Eyelash. I think it would help you to achieve flow faster and to forget about your butterflies. I think stress and stuff like that, once you get focused, you leave it behind. So what you want to do is find something to focus on to drop it. It hurts your brain personally. Does playing chess also hurt your brain once you're actually playing? Bubba has studies that show the opposite of what everyone else says. It hurts while you play too. Maybe you're just not engaged in the right activity then. If thinking about chess positions just hurts your brain, maybe you don't want to do it. I don't know. I would believe you, Medios. Anytime somebody says studies show something, 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 I would certainly believe it if they then said that they made it up. And if they said they actually did read it, fine too. Who knows? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Eyelash. Maybe it's just not for you. I mean, obviously you do it well, but if you don't enjoy it, if it actually hurts your brain, then maybe not. You can get a concentration headache. Yeah. Yeah, everybody's individual. Some of these things will not work for different people. One way to get out of butterflies and get better sleep is going to be the exercise piece. I think is very helpful for a lot of people. So I would say if it's the night before and you're feeling nervous about the event the next day, physical exercise I think is a great way to forget about some of that. I think just like when your body's going, it's harder to be all nervous. Like yesterday, right before the tournament, Kimmy came into chat and she's like, gosh, I'm feeling so nervous. And I was like, I'm feeling nervous too. I've wanted to do this show for 5 years or more. And I'm really like excited, nervous for the show that's about to start. And so I said, well, let's just try doing a couple push-ups. And I did 2 push-ups and the butterflies started to go away after just 2 push-ups. And I imagine like, you know, if you do like 20 jumping jacks, if you run around the block in a circle, I think that's really going to help. But if you do more exercise than that, it's also going to provide you with physical fatigue, and physical fatigue is going to help you with sleeping. Again, some people may be different, and someone may tell me that studies show that people who exercise have trouble sleeping or something like that. I don't know. My personal experience with my own body is if I exercise more, I sleep better. If my kids, if I get them outside and get them to run around, they sleep better. So in my experience, if you got an event that you're getting ready for and you're worried, you're having trouble falling asleep, like even if you're already lying in bed and you're having trouble sleeping, instead of just lying there with something that's not working, try something else. That's one thing I believe in general also is like whatever you try, if it doesn't work, try something else. So if you're lying there and you're not falling asleep, get up and do some exercise. You know, you may want to fall asleep in 1 minute, and you're not going to fall asleep in 1 minute if you go run for 10 minutes. But, you know, you could lie there for 1 minute and 1 minute and 1 minute 50 times without falling asleep. Or you could go run for 10 minutes, come back, and like really fall asleep. So for me, that would really, really, really work. And if you've never tried that, I would suggest that. Okay. If you feel sweaty and gross right before your game, that's not good. Depends, yeah. Depends on the person, whether or not sweat really bothers them. I just came into this show super sweaty. It didn't bother me. I was just trapped in a corn maze for an hour and a half. And I like couldn't get out. And I was like, I was 2 minutes late for the show because I literally couldn't get out of this corn maze. And it was like 95 degrees. And we're like going through the corn maze and going through this corn maze. And like the kids were like, dead. We couldn't find the way out. And I ran up the stairs here. I haven't had anything. Here's my water bottle. Came running in from the corn maze. Jumped straight on the computer. Kostya said, let's do Sensei at 2 p.m. and do your show at 1 instead of Sensei at 1 and your show at 2. And I said, cool. And I clicked go live, you know, no nothing. But it doesn't bother me. For some people, it would definitely bother them. And maybe Eyelash, it bothers you just to know that I'm sweaty as I'm doing this show. Maybe that's just too much and you need to switch channels. Skaklofalaik Yark Yafter just did a few push-ups and it worked for them already. So I think that will work for a lot of people. So that handles butterflies and sleep depth to some extent. That's one piece of advice you can do on it. The other piece of advice for butterflies and sort of like nerves and stuff is just repeating an activity a bunch of times. That's the other thing that's helped for me. Like people who are too stressed about like a tournament my advice is like, you just do the tournament and then another tournament and another tournament, and eventually you just stop being nervous because you've done a whole bunch of them, right? You find ways to take pressure off of that stuff. I also find that if you feel like it's my one chance, it's my only, this is my like thing, you know, this is my moment, you got to own it or whatever, then you start throwing up on your own shirt. I think that stuff is bad. Like anything where you put too much pressure on yourself. So when I was worried about like, do I have the money to go to the next tournament? Like, is it worth it? Am I going to miss this thing or that thing? Like all that sort of stuff. Or like, you know, I've got like 2 more months to make master, and then like, you know, then my window's closed and I'm done with myself, and you know, I'm cutting myself off, putting a lot more pressure on myself for those individual events. I would say all of that is bad for most people. So things that take the pressure off the event and make it like more normal instead of really super one of a kind is helpful for most people. That said, there are people who are like, you know, clutch performers and who do better being like really amped up and like, you know, thinking that one thing is super important. But for me, like knowing that I'm going to play 10 tournaments helps me like not be as stressed about the tournament right in front of me. So you could do something like you could tell yourself, I'm going to play these 6 tournaments. And then when you go to the first of them, maybe you feel less stressed because you already know you have plans for the next 5, right? So you say, I'm going to play these 6 events. Or you could even like already sign up for them or pay entry fees or whatever, right? Or commit to them, put them on your calendar, that sort of stuff in some way. And that's going to help you be like, oh, it's just one of many tournaments. For people who tend to be more nervous, that's going to help. For the people who you know, are clutch performers, they don't have this problem anyway, so they don't need my advice. That wouldn't apply to them. All right. All right, so then we've got a question. Should you pump up or chill out? Should you listen to like, you know, screaming metal? Or should you listen to like the sounds of the ocean? That depends on like what kind of person you are, what kind of chess you play. I don't think there's an answer for that at all. So I'm going to leave that one unanswered. How do you know what to prepare when you don't know your opponent? In general, your biggest opponent in chess is yourself, right? So you always know that you're going to be like fighting against your own weaknesses. Every time you go out to perform, that's going to be the biggest thing that you're facing is your own current limitations, proclivities, bad habits, and perhaps even like, you know, limitations. So that's what you're going to be up against largely. So if you don't know who you're playing against, it's always good to prepare for yourself. Okay. So, no, not a wizard. I can easily lose my train of thought just reading a comment. So I was talking about preparing for yourself. Right. Okay, and I was going to say, when I go to a tournament, even just at the X's and O's chess level, every time I go to like a tournament that's like with preparation, like a round robin, like an IM tournament or a GM tournament or something like that, a lot of people will look at their opponent's games to prepare for their opponent, right? But I will look at my games. Okay, so I will look myself up in the database and like prepare for me as if I were an opponent. So I'll look at my games and be like, oh, if I were playing this guy, I would like go for his like French defense right now. I would expect that like he's going to play the French defense again. There's this line where like I don't think he got a good position in these couple games, or there's this game where it looks like he actually got lucky, so he might not realize that his opening wasn't that good. I'll do that. So I will actually prepare for myself that way before a tournament, and that will tell me what other people are going to prepare for me. So that will be a very useful thing to do in general, and certainly something you can do for a tournament that you are not aware of exactly who your opponents are and want to prepare for. All right, let me join Kostya's Zoom and see how close we are to setting up for Between Two Senseis.
David is joining. David, you're going to want to leave. All
right, they're still setting up, so I'm going to answer one or two more of the questions that we've got here because we've got a really good set of questions. I'm going to go to this question from Chess Coach Net and another question that I think goes along with it really well. So we had an earlier question. What do you do if midway through an event you're doing badly on your goals? And I think that's going to go well with Chess Coach Net's question of how do you recover from an early loss in a tournament, right? What do you do if we've done this preparation, right? Either we've prepared to win or we've prepared some goal that we're going to defend better, and here we are in the tournament, and when we get bad positions, we're defending badly, and we feel like we're doing badly on our goal. What should we do? To me, this is actually where goals really shine through, because to me, in that situation, you have your goal to like keep you focused and motivated, right? So to me, at that point, you want to just keep doing the best you can on your goal, right? And I think that if you've got a goal other than winning or losing, that can also help you with the recovering from an early loss in a tournament, right? If my goal in a tournament is to work on my defense or work on my patience when I've got an advantage, to not like go crazy, but to like give my opponent some room to like mess up before I try to like force a win. Whatever my goal is, having a goal is very good for being resilient about losses, because it means no matter where your result is in the tournament, even if you're not going to make 6 out of 7 or 4 out of 6 or whatever your like sporting goal was. For some people, it was that you wanted to win every game, and once you don't win one game, you're upset. If you've got a goal that you can always work on in the next game, very likely, that helps you to just shake off any losses and just stay focused on working on that goal. So I think that the goals really play a huge part in that. Now, let's say you're doing badly on your goal. Let me just pick one of the goals we've talked about at random. You're doing badly at the clock goal, okay? Your goal was to use your time better. So we're playing a 30-minute game tournament, and our goal was to use at least 25 minutes per game. And we're 2 or 3 rounds into a 6-round tournament, and we see that we have been using less than 5 minutes every game still. Well, what we need to do then is implement even more scaffolding for ourselves. Well, that's what teachers call it. But we need to implement more little things to help us get to the point that we're not getting to, right? So something like writing down your move every 10 minutes is an example of like a scaffold, right? It's like a thing you make yourself do to help you get to your goal, to help you achieve your goal, right? So we need to implement more of those things if we're not achieving our goal. So we say, I'm going to write down how much time I have at move 5, move 10, move 15, move 20, etc. Or we say, my goal is unrealistic. You know, like I was using 2 minutes. Now I'm using 4 minutes. I'm so far away from 25. I don't see how I'm ever going to achieve that goal. Well, maybe we could bring down our goal a little bit. So like bring the goal a little bit closer so we've got a better chance of achieving it. So let's say round 4, I'm going to try and use 10 minutes of my time at least. Round 5, I'm going to try and use 12 minutes. And round 6, I'm going to try and use at least 15 minutes. So now instead of trying to go from being somebody who uses 2 minutes out of 30 to somebody who uses 25 minutes out of 30 in one game, I've laid out sort of like a step-by-step progression where I've got a better chance of like achieving some kind of success towards my goal. So then I could come out of the tournament, and let's say in the last game of the tournament, I used like 14 minutes on the clock. I didn't achieve my pre-tournament goal of using 25 minutes on every game, right? But I could still feel like, hey, I can see that I made progress. I can achieve something. And if I could go from 2 minutes to 14, then certainly I can go from 14 to 20 and eventually 25, right? So your two basic options if you're midway through a tournament and you're not achieving your goals are create more little steps and scaffolding for yourself to help you do it. I'm going to write down the time every single move. The first, like my When my opponent makes a move, my checklist now goes, write down how much time I have on the clock. Then what piece did they move? What, whatever else you think about on a move, right? And then before I make a move, I'm going to check how much time I have. And I'm going to look at that time and I'm going to write it down. And I'm going to ask myself, do I think I used enough time on this move? You build in as much stuff as you need to. And, a lot of this stuff is like wasting your time. But in this case, this is somebody who's, not using their time anyway. So it can only help them. So building in things to help yourself get there, and also maybe move the goal a little bit closer to yourself or make it a little more specific to make sure that you can achieve tangible and specific success in that direction. Okay. Yes, Alexa. Yeah, Eilish, you can make the opposite. You can make an opposite goal for that person, right? That person could have a general goal, like I want to have at least 2 minutes left on my clock at the end of a game. I don't want to get under 2 minutes, right? Nope, you're good here, Frank. No lesson today. And thanks for joining us. We got a talk show coming up next. This has been kind of a blah 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 talk thing already anyway, but yeah, next up is going to be our talk show with 3 senseis talking together. So Eyelash, you would make a goal like I want to have at least 2 minutes left, but that goal you might not achieve right away in a game or two, right? It's a little bit general, doesn't tell you how to get there. So then you break it down. You're like, at move 10, I want to have at least 20 of my 30 minutes left. At move 20, I want to have at least 10 minutes. Make more checkpoints for yourself, right? Just like I could break it down for the player who needs to use more time, you can break it down for the player who needs to use less time. And just be like every 30 seconds, every now and then, like I just look up at the clock. And if it's reached a certain point, then I'm like, move. And you like make a move and like let it go. You just move something. And you just force yourself. Even if you're not ready to move, you make a move, and gradually you like work towards it. And you can gradually make that better. Or you can say like, I know I'm going to get down to the increment. So my goal is to make as many moves as I can before I get down to the increment. So at the end of every game, you write down the move number that you were on when you got down to the increment, right? So first it was like move 20. Then some other game it's move 21. Some other game it's 18. And then finally, you start to put in some effort and you're like, okay, this game was 25. This game it was 30. This game it was 35. And that way you can see that you're making some progress. So let me show you guys something here that's similar to this. In these endgame fundamentals, defending knight versus pawn. No, defending knight versus knight and pawn. All right. I don't know if you guys can perfectly see this, but I can probably just switch to this view here. Okay, look at this position for a second. All right, I see this capture is not perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is a position that I was training. And the goal of the position is to draw as black in this position here. That's the goal. You're supposed to try and draw as black from this position, okay? Now, I can't do it. I lost to the computer like 50 times in a row, okay? So, I changed my goal. That's okay. I changed my goal. My goal was I'm going to try and make the game last as long as possible before I blunder and the computer beats me. So at first, I was losing in like 6 moves every single time. Every single time in this, right? Like, play like here, here, here. Right? So that's move 5. It just gave me a double question mark on king a6. It's in the wrong direction. I move my king to try and get away from what this knight's going to do. The knight comes to d6. I can't take the knight, so I have to switch to this knight to d5 idea. Computer pushes c7. You play knight d5, so you've got knight b6 check, and the computer throws in knight c4 check and you lose, right? So I'm like, okay, I blundered on move 5. So then I would start over, right? And I would just try to like at least play 6 moves without losing, right? So now I'm like, okay, he wants to go knight f5, knight d6. Possibly when he does, I'd rather be on b4, but not on a5 where there's knight c4 check. So I'm going to go here. And now I'm going to get away from that square. Oh, now it says 8.95 again. Oops, he's threatening me and I can't go to c3. But I made it to move 6 instead of move 5, you know, and then I restart. And those who have followed me working on this, Tone Deaf remembers it, those who have followed me working on this know that I still can't draw this. But I've made it to move 30 without losing. I slowly pushed it from 6 to 7 to 10. Then I started getting into the teams. Like, I could really defend correctly. I would just eventually lose my focus or concentration and, like, miscalculate something. And then I got to 20, 25. You know, I started to really push that. So I was making incremental improvement there. That's exactly what you would do, Eyelash, with running out of time, right? Maybe you can't avoid eventually using all your time. Maybe that's how you are right now. But you're going to push it, and you're going to just say, on what move was I down to the increment? Move 20, move 25, move 30, move 35, move 37, move 38. And gradually, you're playing almost a full game before you're down to the increment. And you can see tangible success and improvement there as you do that. So that's how to like keep these goals motivating you and pushing you. You need to keep them somewhat achievable. You need to make them specific. You need to break them down into pieces. And you need to give yourself scaffolding when necessary to help you get there little by little. These things will be extremely motivating. They build your buy-in, they build your investment, and they can help to support you in the worst of times during a tournament, during the toughest of things. They can give you something to keep fighting for and keep working towards, you know? Some people watched me losing this endgame here to the computer. You know, like for like 2 hours. I just sat there losing for 2 hours again and again and again, fighting this one stupid pawn. And they're like, is this guy some kind of insane masochist? Like, I wouldn't have the patience to sit here and get like beaten like this, but I've got my little goal and I'm just working on it. I'm just trying to get one move further, one move further. And I know that it's possible. If I can go 10 moves without losing, I know I could get to 11. So I keep fighting for that. And good luck to all of you doing that. Now I will make way for Jesse and Kostya, so don't go anywhere. If you don't see the next show within like 5 or 10 seconds, just refresh your window and it should pop up. Alrighty.